but I will be going over it as a bit of an overview, and especially focusing on some of the places where I think people could use some extra reminders, and places where people sometimes have issues or have confusion around the protocol. And then we will also get into some of the digital data collection pilot, which I think a lot of people are interested in. I'm excited about it. I'll be showing you how that form works, and hopefully we can answer any questions that come up. But yeah, basically feel free to ask questions throughout. You can pop them in the chat. My colleague Jenna, if you see Jenna Quinn answering a question in the chat or sending you a message, she is also an Ontario Nature staff member, and she's just helping out on the back end. Yeah, so like I was saying, feel free to pop questions in the chat while we go, but there will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So before we dive into it, I just wanted to also introduce myself and my my connection to the land, and the land that I am here on today. So I am a third-generation settler. My grandparents came here from Latvia and from England. Sorry, my great-grandparents came here from Latvia and from England, and I'm very, very grateful to be able to live and work and spend time in nature here in this beautiful place. Today, I am presenting from Toronto, on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I hope that you all are really, looking forward to looking for snakes and taking this as an opportunity to go out and connect with the land and learn from the snakes, and hopefully do our part to help protect them and steward the lands that they live on. Yeah, I encourage you all to spend some time outside tonight if you can, and thinking about your connection to the land. All right, so I'm going to dive into the protocol itself. Next slide, and I'm going to just start out with a piece that I think is relevant to many of you who are either setting up a site for the first time or might be setting up a new site. So I wanted to remind you about what to consider when choosing a site. So for snakes, we want to be setting up the transect, the coverboard transect for the LTMP protocol. That's redundant, for the long-term monitoring protocol, in an area that snakes are going to use. And so it's important to take into consideration the habitat type when we're setting up these coverboards, as well as how much sun is going to hit the boards. So you're much more likely to get snakes under boards if they are in an area with open sun, with full sun. So open habitat types are the best for that. And these can include things like meadows, prairies, forest clearings, rock barrens, all sorts of habitats that are good for snakes and that get lots of sunlight. Another thing that I like to remind people about in terms of getting sun on the boards is that it's especially important in the mornings. So if you are setting up a site in edge habitat, it's great to set it up along the south edge of a forest where you're going to get sunlight all day, or an east-facing edge where you're going to get morning sunlight. Another thing to keep in mind, of course, is whether you've seen snakes in the area before. That's always a really helpful indicator that that's going to be a good spot to set up an LTMP site. And one thing that people sometimes forget about is that it needs to be somewhere that you can access. And so there's kind of two parts to that. One is I usually don't recommend people set up their site somewhere where they have to walk for an hour to get to it, especially if it's going to be, through really difficult terrain. So You want to be able to get to the site fairly easily. And then the other piece is making sure that you have permission to access the land that the site is on. So most of you are affiliated with land trusts or conservation organizations or other organizations where you own land and therefore you have access to it. But in some cases, especially with some of our volunteers, you need to make sure that that the property where you're setting up a site is one where you have permission to do so. So what do those sites look like? Many of you I know are very familiar with this. One thing I wanted to point out is that in recent years, we have changed the wording a little bit about how the transect should be set up. We had previously said it should be in a straight line, and we're very strict about that, but it is perfectly fine for a transect to follow the curve of the natural habitat if needed. So there is this diagram, which can be found in the protocol, that shows how you can set up a transect. The boards should be 5 meters apart and set out all in a row in a single habitat type. So all these details about the board specifications and how to set up the transect can be found in the protocol itself. But just a reminder that if you haven't yet set up a site, a transect that you're planning to set up this year, you do need to do so at least 2 weeks before surveys start. So for most sites, we're pretty much 2 weeks out from surveys starting now. So just a reminder that that is a really important part so that snakes have time to find the boards and the boards have time to become part of the natural habitat a little bit more. All right, I wanted to also remind everyone about the weather guidelines for these surveys. First of all, as I mentioned, it's coming up to the time when you're going to be starting surveys. Some people have asked about how to know exactly when to start. There is a table in the protocol that has a suggested date depending on your location. For most people, it's going to be within a week or so of May 1st. But if you're not sure if it's the right time, what we recommend is starting surveys once overnight temperatures are above freezing and you have consistent daytime temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius. So you can also, take a walk around, take a look for snakes. And once you start seeing snakes are out and about in your area, it's probably a good time to start surveys. And then the other piece is the weather guidelines for during surveys themselves. We do recommend doing surveys when air temperatures are between 10 and 28 degrees. The wind is not too high and there's no rain. I've had many conversations with people about this. Sometimes you're out there and it's 29 degrees, but it's the evening and it's going to be cooling down. Or, you get all the way out to your site and it starts sprinkling rain halfway through. These pieces are a little bit more flexible. If you're out there, you've already started your survey and it goes up or down a degree Celsius, or it starts to rain a little bit, you can finish the survey. But we do, as much as possible, want to stay within these guidelines. The other piece of choosing when to do surveys that I know some people have had questions about is the surveying within the 2-hour windows after sunrise or before sunset. And so this is a piece that is it's something that was decided based on biology of snakes, based on how we know they use cover boards, but also is really important for the consistency of the data. And so if we are looking at data and comparing data between sites, and we see, lots of snakes present at one site and no snakes present at another site, but one of the sites conducted surveys within the 2-hour window that we asked them to, and another conducted them in the afternoon. We don't know if those differences between the sites are due to differences in the protocol or actual true differences in what snakes are present in an area. So that's just, I wanted to reiterate that that's a really important part, and that we are doing a long-term study. And so we really want the data to be as consistent as possible across all sites. So that 2-hour survey window is very important, as well as much as possible, getting at least 8 surveys done, spaced apart by 5 to 9 days. So, people often do about 1 per week. We've had some really great data from some sites in recent years where they've continued for up to even 20 surveys throughout the field season. That's amazing. We love to get that data. So if you are able to continue past 8 surveys, that's great, but it is not required. The requirement is 8 surveys. Okay, I also wanted to highlight this part of the cheat sheet. So this comes from the cheat sheet that is in the protocol. I think it's Appendix 7. And it is a piece about collecting survey effort. And so we call this stopwatch time, because we ask you to record the amount of time it takes you to survey for snakes, without including the time that you spend actually collecting data on snakes. So this piece is a little bit confusing for a lot of people, and I'm hopeful that the cheat sheet has helped with that. But I wanted to clarify that what we're looking for here is a measure of how much time you are actively looking for snakes, and not how much time it takes you to write down how many snakes you found and if they're male or female or adults or juveniles. So when you begin your survey, you will start the stopwatch, and as long as you're not finding any snakes, you're just looking for snakes, you can keep it running. But if you find a snake under a cover board or near the cover board transect, you want to stop the stopwatch and take the time that it needs to write down all the data about those snakes, and then resume your stopwatch so that you continue collecting or continue counting the amount of time it takes you just to look for snakes, to actually search for them, and not to be recording the data. So I hope that is, I hope that clarifies things a little bit, and feel free to ask questions about that if needed. Okay, some folks have asked questions about this data entry piece that is on this slide. I'm not going to go over in detail like how we collect data on the age and sex of species and identifying snake species. There are many resources that we have that are provided both in the protocol and on our website for this sort of thing. So we have snake ID quizzes on our website, as well as a snake sexing quiz on our website. I think Jenna will be putting those in the chat. There we go. So you can use those to, review your snake ID skills and sexing skills, or to train any new volunteers or interns or anyone that you have helping. And then within the protocol, we added a table of the approximate sizes of snakes of different ages for each species. So hopefully you can estimate the length of the snake if you're not sure if it's an adult or a juvenile or a neonate, and use that table to help you figure out what age class it probably fits with them. Now, when it comes to that data entry piece that I mentioned, I'm hoping this will also be helped with the digital data collection a form that I'm going to go over in a few minutes. But it's really important that we have the data submitted without multiple answers for a single cell in the same cell. So let me say that again in a way that is maybe less confusing. Each snake that has a different age, sex, or species needs to have its own line in the data. This is really most important is when you are transcribing data, but also I see people do it on their on their data sheets a lot. So, you know, you can enter the data, you can write the data on your data sheets however is easiest for you, but it's most important when you're transcribing that you enter it as one row for each snake that has a unique age or sex as well as a unique species. So I've got an example here where you can see under the same cover board, board 9, there were 3 eastern garter snakes. 2 of them were adult females, 1 of them was an adult male, and so those have separate lines from each other. And then, of course, the red-bellied snake also has its own line. If you do have multiple snakes of the same species, the same age, the same sex, you can put those all in the same line together, like this eastern garter snake at board 12 here. I also had some people ask about photos of snakes. I want to remind you that what is required are photos of any species at risk that you see. And for those, we want photos of ID features especially. So, you know, if you think that you've seen a ribbon snake, it's really great if you can get a picture of the head that shows that, that white crescent in front of the eye, but also, you know, close-up photos of the scales, so you can see if they're smooth or keeled. Those can be really helpful for confirming the ID of species at risk snakes. And then any other snakes where you're unsure of the species or you're unsure of the age or sex, you can also send us photos of these snakes. I wanted to show some photo examples of what are good photos. In the middle here, we have a dorsal photo of a milk snake. And so having that whole, the whole snake in the picture is really helpful. The two I especially want to point out are the ventral pictures, so in the bottom left, and then the red belly on the top right there. It's really important that we can see the whole tail and the cloaca, and a little bit of the belly before the cloaca as well. And as much as possible, holding that tail straight so that we can get a sense of how quickly, of what the shape is. Because when we're doing visual sexing of snakes, it's really based on the shape of the tail. And if the tail is all curled up, we really can't tell if it's a male or a female. So hopefully that is helpful. Okay. So I'm going to take a quick look in the chat just for questions that are specific to the protocol. So I saw, Lance, you had a question about the search time. So we do include for search time the time walking between cover boards. And that's because as you're moving between boards, you might be seeing incidental snakes. You know, there might be a snake traveling that you might see. And so you are still looking for snakes, or you should be. If you are moving from one board to the next and you see a bird out of the corner of your eye and you stop looking for snakes and you go off to take some pictures of a bird, then you would want to stop the stopwatch for that time and resume it when you go back to the surveying. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, I see also a question, I think, from Elaine. If you get the same individual SAR on multiple dates, do we continue to photograph? So yes, if you are not, well, sorry, let me start over. The protocol that we use does not track individuals in any way. So if you think that you are seeing the same individual SAR, species at risk snake multiple times, that's possible. And sometimes we can tell just from photos. So it's actually especially important to get photos if you think you might be seeing the same species at risk snake over and over again, because we might be able to compare patterns for certain species and be able to figure out if it is in fact an individual that's being recaptured multiple times. So, so yes, please do send photos multiple times for species at risk that you're seeing on different dates. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions right now. You can continue to pop them in the chat, and if there's any that I missed, I will address them at the end. But for now, I'm going to go into the digital data collection part. So I'm going to switch slides so you can all see this. So in terms of digital data collection, I think most of you should have heard a little bit about our plan. And I did send out an email that just not too long before the event started, telling people that you can download the Survey123 app ahead of the event if you'd like. So if you have done so, you can use the QR code on the screen here to be able to access the form through the app. But I will give a little bit more detail to start. And yes, Jenna has put a link as well in the chat for how to download the app if you didn't get the email I sent earlier, and a link to the form itself. So I'm going to start by just explaining a little bit about how Survey123 works and why we think it's going to be a good fit for us. We did test it out ourselves last year, and it worked quite well. So we're pretty happy with it. But basically, it's a free app that you can download, and you can use the app to submit forms that without needing to be connected to the internet and without needing an account. So you don't need an account, you don't need to pay anything. You can just download the app and then access this form that we have already created. You can fill it out, and when you've finished filling it out, you can send it directly to us. So that takes away the piece where you have to go back home after the survey, transcribe your data, and then send us the data sheet or the transcribed data at the end of the year, which I know is a lot of work for everyone on our end as well. I want to point out that this app can also be used in the field without any service or internet connection. You do need to connect to the internet to be able to submit the form, but you can edit it in a draft form. You can save it in your outbox through the app, and then you can submit it once you have a connection again. So it's really very easy to use. You just go onto the app while you're in the field, no internet is needed. When you get back from the field, you just hit send and it gets sent right to Ontario Nature. And then hopefully you don't have to worry about it again. We're also hopeful that this means that if you have questions, or if we have questions about something that you saw, we can address those right away, because I'm sure many of you have gotten emails from me or someone else from Ontario Nature in October asking you about something you saw in May and you just don't remember. So totally understandable, but we're hoping that this will improve that as well. Okay, and also you will be able to see the data that you have submitted after you send it. So you hit send, and then you can go in and see the forms that you have submitted. And if you want an Excel or a CSV version of that data, then I can also provide that to you. Yes, great question in the chat. Can we submit photos via the app too? You can. It's an option to submit them separately, but it is built into the form that we created, that you can take photos directly in the app and then submit them with the survey. So I'm going to go into the form itself. I'm going to share what that looks like, and we'll go through it and just explain how you go about entering the data. I'll show you where you can submit photos and all of that. But if you want to follow along on your own device, you're welcome to, like I said, use that link or use the QR code to access the form. And then you can even like enter in some test data and try submitting it and make sure that everything is working on your end. And I also would be happy to hear any feedback, or if there are things that aren't working, I would love to know that now so that I can fix them before you're out in the field having issues with things not working. Okay, so I'm going to change what I am sharing. So if you haven't yet scanned the QR code and you want to, now's your last chance. And I'm just going to switch sharing the survey 1, 2, 3 form. So hopefully you can all see that now. All right, so this is what the form looks like when you open it in the app. You can see it says LTMP coverboard survey at the top. There is also a habitat survey version of this form. I'm not going to go through it today, but I will be able to share that as well. But basically, it starts the same way that your physical data sheet starts. With this survey information. So you're going to input the name of your site. Hopefully you all know what your site is called, or you can at least put something in that indicates the organization that is monitoring, or something that makes it clear which site you are surveying. And then survey number here, sorry, I scrolled fast. The survey number, so that is, if it's your first survey of the year, you put 1, if it's your second, you put 2, and so on and so forth. Then you enter surveyor name. It will auto-populate the survey date, so with the day that you open the form and start filling it out. So if you open a form, today, and then you go into the field and you start filling out that same form in a couple of weeks, you just need to make sure that you change this date to the correct date. But you can easily change it by just clicking it. And another part that this form has right here is this random starting board number generator. So as you should know, we use a randomized protocol. So each survey should be starting at a random cover board. And from there, you continue to the end of the transect and then loop back to the beginning. So for example, here it's generated board 19 as the starting board for this survey. So you can go out, you check board 19 all the way up to 24, and then you go back to board 1 and check boards 1 to 18. And there's a little explanation of that here with where it shows the question. If you prefer to generate your own random cover board, starting cover boards, you can do that as well, and you can go in and just modify this to whatever board you already generated. So it is editable. Next, there's this starting weather section. So you can input the air temperature, select on the Beaufort wind scale what level of wind there is, as well as choose the starting wind direction. And then you can fill out the starting precipitation and the cloud cover percentage as well. And so each of these have a little explanation that hopefully makes it clear how to fill it out. And many of them, where possible, are drop-down options. So you can just tap it and then select the option that is relevant to you. You don't have to be typing in, no precipitation every time. I've seen questions in the chat. Just want to see if there's anything. Okay, cool. I will address that later. Okay, so that's how that all works. And then once you've finished your weather data collection, you can just click the survey start time box and it will auto-populate with the current time. And then you go to the next page and begin surveying. So Once you have input all of that starting information, you can go to page 2 of the form, and this is where you're going to enter all the data on any perks that you find during surveys. So if you check your first board and you see a snake underneath, you can click the little plus to record an observation under a cover board. It will remind you to, so you can input the board number, let's say it's board 1. Nope, that's not 1. Board 1, it will record the current time, and then it will remind you to pause your stopwatch while you're collecting data on the snake. So here, again, you press plus for every snake that you are recording data on. So if I press the plus here, it will give me a little form to fill out for each snake. And again, we want you to fill out one of these for each snake that has a unique species, age, and sex. So if you have 2 garter snakes, but one's an adult male and one's a juvenile, you're going to fill out this out twice. The nice thing is you don't have to enter the board number and the time over and over again. If they're all found under the same board, you can enter multiple snakes for the same board without having to enter that data again. So here we are, we're at board 1, it's 4:36 p.m. And whatever species you've found, there is a drop down. We've sorted it more or less by what you're most likely to see, so more common species at the top. It's a very long list. So another option is you can start typing and it will pop up the options that match what you've typed. So you can do the drop down and select, but also if you're looking for red-bellied and you can't find it, you can just start typing in red-bellied and then select that for the species name. Yes, okay. So Amy, I see your question and I'm going to get to that in just 1 second. So if you see 2 red bellies and they're both juveniles, for example, it will not give you an option to input the sex. And that is because for any snake that isn't an adult, we don't have a reliable way of identifying the sex of the snake. So if you see adult snakes, it'll give you the option to enter sex of the adult. If you're not sure what it is, you can always click unknown. If you know that it is female or male, you can select those. But if you see a neonate or a juvenile, it doesn't let you input a sex. It will automatically put that as unknown because there is no way to know. The reason for unknown age, the reason that we also have it be automatically unknown sex if the age is unknown is because usually if you are handling a snake to be able to sex it, you should be able to figure out the age. But if folks think that it's likely that you might know the sex but not the age of a snake, then I would consider modifying that so that you can have an unknown age but still have a known sex. So I will take that into consideration. All right, so let's say we've got 2 red-bellied snakes under this cover board. They're both juveniles, they're both undercover. And then under the same cover board, we also have a garter snake. So you're going to use the plus sign above this text here to add another snake. You can see it still says board 1, it still says 436. This time we're going to put in an eastern garter snake. Let's say we've just found one and it's an adult male. Probably for almost all snakes that are in this snakes undercover board option, your behavior is going to be undercover. There is also an option, if you find a fed skin under a board or a dead snake, you can also mention that or select that in the behavior here. And then this is where you have an option to take a photo. So not going to click it here because I think it might take a photo of me. But you can just click the camera button to take a picture in the app, or you can select a file from your phone or your computer where you've already taken a photo and that you want to include. So if, for example, you weren't sure what the sex of this eastern garter snake was and you wanted to include a photo of the underside of the snake, you could do that here. And the comments are for each individual snake. So if you notice that this adult male garter snake was in bed, you could make a note of that as well. So at this point, that's all the snakes we found under the cover board. We had 2 red bellies and 1 eastern garter snake. We're going to move on to our next cover board. So then you're going to want to click the plus below this text. It explains that here, and go to the next cover board. So, you know, let's say you check a couple cover boards, there's no snakes under there, then you get board 5. Input board 5, you input the time, and again, you can enter as many snakes as you need, depending on how many you find under there. So it works the same for each cover board. It has the same little snake data form. Okay, so that is what the observations under cover boards looks like, and that is for any snakes that you find under the cover boards. Sometimes you might find a snake or another herp on top of a cover board or like right next to a cover board. You can also put those there. But if you find snakes that are, you know, between cover boards or moving around in the habitat nearby, or maybe you finish your survey and you are walking back to your car and you see a snake and you want to add it in, you can add in under incidental observations any herps that you find not under the cover boards or not right by the cover boards. So in this one, there is an option to take the coordinate. So it will take a coordinate of your current location. There is an option that, like, if the coordinates don't work, or, you know, they're very low accuracy, you can put the coordinates into the comments section if you're using a GPS, for example. But it can take the coordinates for you directly through the app. And then it's very similar, the time of capture, the species name, again, you can type in to reduce the number of options in the dropdown, and same thing with number of individuals, age class, and sex if it's an adult snake, and then behavior. I see a question about submitting multiple photos for each snake. I do believe you can submit multiple photos for the same snake, and then when you add another snake data form, you can add another photo for a different snake. If you have like a lot of photos and it's a pain to enter them or submit them through the app, or, you know, you're taking photos on a camera, it's also okay to submit the photos separately. But you know, if this is the easiest way for you, then I would encourage to submit them through the app. Okay. So let's say you get to the end of the transect and you found all the snakes that you're going to find. You go to page 3, and here's where you write your ending, your ending weather information and your sort of final pieces about the end of the survey. So again, with survey end time, you can tap it and it will auto-populate with the current time. And then you're going to enter the time that you spent surveying in here. So I've input it in a way where you can enter the minutes and the seconds. So if your stopwatch is saying, you know, 12 minutes and 25 seconds, you can enter that as 12 under minutes and 25 under seconds. If you don't have the number of seconds, you only have it as minutes, you can just enter the minutes there, and that is fine. It's not ideal, we would prefer stopwatch time with minutes and seconds if possible. That is an option. And then the ending weather information is very similar to the first page. You've got your air temperature, wind and wind direction, precipitation, and cloud cover. Those are all work the same as the starting weather information. And at the end, there's a comment section where you can add anything else that you want to note about the survey as a whole. And, you know, if there's anything where you weren't able to enter something or it didn't have the right option in the dropdown, you could also make a note of that in the survey comments. Hopefully we've covered everything, but in the case that there's something that we missed or there's an unusual situation, that can be noted in the survey comments there. And then the final section is the disturbance section, which is the same as the version on the physical data sheet. So you can just note what kind of disturbance it is and write out a description of the disturbance, take a photo if it's relevant, and the estimated date of disturbance if possible. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions that are in the chat before the next thing that I want to talk about. So from Verdana, yes, there's a question about making submissions for boards without snakes. Thanks for checking. You do not need to make submissions for boards without snakes. So on page 2 here, you only need to add observations under the cover board observations or the incidental observations if you're actually seeing a snake or another herb. So if you see a skink or a frog or a salamander, you can also enter those under here. And I also want to point out that there's a note here that this includes snakes that are alive, dead, or shed skin. So if you are seeing a dead snake under a cover board or a shed skin, please also enter that using a snake data form so that we have that information. And yeah, but if there's nothing under the board, you don't need to enter board number and the time that you check the board for boards that have no snakes under them. We don't need that information. There's another question here from Jonathan. Do we have plans to make a digital form for the cover board location and habitat survey forms? So yes, I mentioned briefly, there is already a habitat survey form that is ready. I don't have it downloaded on this device, so I can't show it to you today. It needs some final review, but it's basically just like drop down versions of the habitat survey form. So that will also be something that I'll be sending out around the time of habitat survey forms. I might share it before them, but I'll send out a reminder and a link to the habitat, the digital habitat survey form around, you know, early June, probably, like, or late, maybe mid-May, like around the time when people are starting to do their habitat surveys. So, so yes, that is something that we are doing. Hoverboard locations is not something that we have created yet. It is an option if people think that that would be helpful. We'd love to hear that. So it would be fairly easy for us to create. So that could be an option. At the moment, it's used much less than especially the cover board survey form. So that wasn't a priority, but yeah, if that's something that people would like, then we could certainly create that as well. Seeing a message or question from Mike about missing or damaged cover boards. So yes, if there is a missing or a damaged cover board, we would recommend replacing that as soon as possible. Probably like the theoretical best practice would be to skip that board for a couple of weeks after you've replaced it, so that you're not disturbing it too much while snakes are encountering it for the first time. But if it's just one board in your transect, it's probably not a big deal to just continue surveying all of the boards like normal after you've replaced one. Cool. Okay. And then from Katie, can data entered using the digital form be downloaded or accessed at the end of the season for internal site records? So great question. The way that this is shared, you're able to see the forms that you have sent in the format of the form, but there isn't a way for you to download it as a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet. We would be happy to share the Excel or the CSV version of the data from your sites at the end of the season for people who want that for internal records. I am also looking into whether it's possible to change that so that you can download your own data without being able to download everyone else's data, because obviously we don't want everyone to be able to access everyone else's data for security reasons. So we'll see if there's an easier way to do that. But for now, I think the best option is going to be having us send you a copy of the CSV file at the end of the season. Yeah. Okay. I think I got all of the questions that are in the chat so far. Just going to take another look. Okay, cool. Okay, so I am going to show you, sorry, this is shared. Just make sure you're still seeing the right thing. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of things. So for me, when I finished filling this out, you can press the little check mark. Because I haven't filled this out, it's not going to let me actually submit it. But basically, it will give you the option to essentially either save the form in your outbox or send it immediately. If you try and send it and you don't have a connection, it will let you send it, like it'll stay in your outbox and you can send it once you do have an internet connection at a later time. But yeah, basically you can like save it to your outbox or hit send even if you're not connected, and then you can do another survey or like close the app and do whatever else you have to do until you are reconnected to the internet. I'm seeing another question in the chat. If we see the same shed under a board across multiple surveys, do we just report it the first time? Great question. It's something I want to add as a note in this form, but if you do see a shed skin under a board, we recommend removing it from under the board and putting it, beside the transect somewhere out of the way where you're not going to encounter it again and accidentally double count it. So if you see a shed skin, you should remove it from under the board, and then next time you won't see it again because we don't want to be recording the same shed skin over and over again. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my slide. I have a slide that is basically just taking questions. So we've already done that. I'm gonna give another couple of minutes. If there's any other questions that come up, you're welcome to just think about it. I'm also going to just quickly in something so that I can show you what it looks like after you've submitted a form. But in the meantime, I'm going to put up this slide with all of the members who have helped to make this project possible, the LTMP possible throughout the many years that it's been part of Ontario Nature's work, and especially the Hodgson Family Foundation, who helped to fund this training event that we are doing right now. So I will leave that up, and I will give you all some time to think about if you have any other questions. And I will also mention that if anyone has questions about their site specifically, I would be happy to talk about that as well. If there are questions that are more relevant to the broader group, we can address those first. But then if anyone, wants to stick around and ask questions specific to their site, I'm happy to do that, and other folks can leave. Timing question from Amy. All right, so last year the season was extended until the end of September. Does that seem like it will happen this year as well? So basically our permits cover surveys until October, until the end of September. So you are welcome to continue surveys until the end of September. If you have the capacity, the time, the ability to do so, that would be great. So yes, you can continue throughout the season until the end of September. We find in August and September, we tend to find a lot of neonates, which is fun, lots of little baby snakes. So you can certainly do that. But as I said earlier, it's not required. The requirement is 8 surveys from usually around early May till early July. But yes, you're welcome to continue until the end of September if you have capacity. So I have a question about cover boards, being the way that we prepare our cover boards. So some people do use cover boards painted a darker colors, I think, so that they absorb more heat and are more attractive to snakes. The way that we do it does not require painting the cover boards. There's a few reasons for that. Mostly it's logistical. We find that snakes use the boards unpainted. Having an unpainted board also fits into the natural environment a little bit better. The boards can slowly decompose into the environment and not leave any paint behind that might be a contaminant. And it's a little bit less work for the people who are setting up the cover boards as well. You can just use plain plywood. You don't have to spend as much time painting and preparing the boards. So a few different pieces there, but basically to save us some effort and so that we're keeping the boards a little bit more similar to natural cover and not adding any additional like pollutants or anything. Okay, there's a question about timing between field trips. So the surveys need to be spaced apart by 5 to 9 days. So usually people go about once a week. But they should be at least spaced apart by at least 5 days. We find if you go to the boards too often, you're looking under them a lot, and they're disturbed, and they're disturbed a lot, then snakes don't find them as attractive. They don't like to use them as much. Yeah. All right, I started our surveys mid-season last year. Yes, okay, right. So there were questions also that people provided in the registration form, which I didn't address all of them. I think I talked about the photo requirements. There was a question about the timing for GPS points. So in terms of taking GPS points for your cover boards, if they haven't changed, if the transect has existed for at least a year and the cover boards haven't been moved since the previous year, you don't need to send us new coordinates. Maybe you got a new GPS and you were previously using Google Maps and you want to send more accurate coordinates. That would be great, but it's not required. So on the first survey, you can just go out and do a survey like normal. You might want to go out ahead of your first survey and just check that everything is in good order, all the boards are still there. But yeah, you don't need to retake the GPS points every year unless the boards have moved. Yeah. So generally people will take GPS points like when they set up the transect or if they move it. But if they're just staying in the same place, we don't need them year after year. So there were a couple other questions from the registration form that I want to address quickly. So one second, pulling that up. So there have been some people who have asked about funding to cover the cost of cover boards. That is really like a year-to-year dependent thing. We always apply for funding for this project, and we often have funding specific to certain areas. And so if it is a barrier to you, if the cost of cover boards and materials is a barrier to you participating, especially, if you're a private landowner, community scientist who's setting up on your own property, please feel free to reach out to us. And if we have funding or extra cover boards that we can support you with, then we would like to be able to do that. But of course, it all depends on how much money we have each year and where that's allocated. Share the form again and show you what it looks like to submit, because there was a question about that. Okay, let me see if this worked, because there are some required questions, so it might, here, this back over here, and make sure that that is still sharing the right thing. Okay, great. So I think now if I press this button, so yeah, so I've answered all the required questions. So what it'll look like when you click the check mark or the submit button is it'll give you an option to send your survey right now, to continue the survey if you hit it by accident, or to save in your outbox. So if you're not connected, you can just save in outbox. And then it will take you back to this homepage where you can see the form and you can see your outbox. So then you can go into the outbox. If there's something you need to change, you can go into the survey and edit it, and then submit it. Or if you don't need to make any edits to the survey, you can just hit send in the outbox. And that will have it actually go through using the internet connection and send to us. And then you can still see in the sent folder here any forms that you've completed. So I'll show you what it looks like. You can delete forms so you can't see them anymore, or you can go into them and view the form. But this is where I was mentioning there is unfortunately not a way to download it as a CSV, as far as I have figured out, on your end, but you can at least see the data and see what you entered the previous time. So yeah, so that's what that looks like when you actually submit it. And as I mentioned, if you are interested in doing some test data, trying it out, figure out what, to see how it goes and figure out if there's any issues with it or anything that you have questions about before you're actually in the field doing surveys, then feel free to fill it out with some fake data and see how it goes. Okay, I will say once again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for your thank yous in the chat. And Jenna shared a feedback form for today's training. We would really appreciate if you fill that out. You can also let us know in there if there's any ways we can support you with LTMP surveys this year, or with participating using the digital data collection. So please fill that out, or if you prefer, you can send me an email. Probably you all or most of you know my email, or you know someone who knows my email. Otherwise, I'm not sure how you got to this training, but I'm just going to put it in the chat here. It's tegan@ontarionature.org. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And again, if anyone wants to stick around and ask some additional questions or specific questions about your site, feel free to do so.